India's first and only daily show dedicated to startups and entrepreneurship. I'm Chandra Shrikant, joining you live from India's startup capital, Bangalore, and we have a power-packed show over the next 20 minutes.
And I'm Kumar, coming to you live from the Nasscom India Leadership Forum 2016 here in Mumbai. First up, a look at all that's making headlines in the world of startups. We have a big exclusive voice on the show, the co-founder of Square, Jim McKelvey, in conversation with us on his take on the payment ecosystem in India and how he plans to invest in startups here in this country. A big name in the Indian payment landscape, MobiKwik, is unfazed by competition and says technology innovation will help it hold an edge over the others. SoftBank confirms the Oyo Rooms deal in its quarterly results. We take a look at how its India portfolio has fared in this special report. Wearables on your wrist will soon replace phones. That's the word coming in from GoKey's founder and CEO, Vishal Gonda. And an online storm breaks out over Silicon Valley investor and Facebook board member Marc Andreessen's tweets on free basics. We tell you why Andreessen is getting roasted on Twitter today.
Top story is clearly going to be that Nasscom India Leadership Forum and the key takeaways for startups from the first day, because clearly there was a lot of focus on payments. And Krishna has a special guest with him to really give us more perspective, Ravi Gururaj, who really takes care of everything to do with startups. Krishna, before anything, you must ask him if the NILF in Mumbai was as exciting as the NPC that happens in Bangalore. I'm sure Bangalore wins hands down.
I hope so. I have with me Ravi Gururaj over here. Ravi, thank you so much for taking time out to be with us here on ET Now, Startup Central, India's first and daily show on startups. Nasscom India Leadership Forum 2016, talk to us. What is the big highlight of this year?
Well, you know, the conference is off to a great start. It's all about the smart enterprise, how transformations all the way to disruptions are modifying and morphing that the smart enterprise of the future. So, you know, today we had a whole series of sessions that touch on fintech, and it's been a very exciting day.
That's exactly what I remember. Fintech, mobile payment solutions, it seems to be the big theme over here at this year's Nasscom India Leadership Forum, isn't it?
And rightly so, because, you know, India is going through a transformation, a true inflection point in fintech. Not only do we have digital identity that's hit a huge critical mass of nearly a billion at this point. You have NPCI pushing a range of APIs and access to exchanges of various kinds that allow interchange of currencies. You have payment wallets like Paytm and others that have just exploded in their adoption. I think, you know, we're just ripe for a huge amount of disruption in the next few years. And so, you know, I think it's the right theme in terms of being able to pick up what's going on in fintech. And we've had some global entrepreneurs here as well. You met Jim from Square, and I think that's a wonderful, session that he led this afternoon.
Yeah, it was a wonderful session with Jim McKelvey. I did catch up with him, but before that, I have to ask this question coming to you from Chandra in Bengaluru. What trumps what? National product, meet in Bangalore for Nasscom, or is it the Leadership Forum here in Bangalore?
No, you're asking me. That's a Sophie's choice here. I love both of them. They have very different, impact, very different focuses. I think this is about the larger companies looking at the ecosystem, looking at the industry. I think the product conclave is very different.
Politically correct. Politically correct. You can't pick one.
No, but I think over time, you'll start to see a lot of cross-pollination. And we're starting to see that here. We have a tech cafe where we're featuring a lot of startups. Almost every panel at this event too has, startup roots of some kind or the other, and startup representation of some kind or the other. So,
all right. Okay, so ties then, Chandra, that there is the national product meet in Bengaluru is on par with the Leadership Forum here in Mumbai, is the word coming from Ravi Gururaj. But as Ravi was just talking about, the big guest, the big man over here was Jim McKelvey, the co-founder of Square, one of the hottest Silicon Valley startups, speaking about the mobile payment ecosystem's evolution in India and how he doesn't care about the term called unicopsis in Silicon Valley, where unicorns valuations are taking a hit in Silicon Valley. Listen to that conversation first up.
So India's doing some tremendous stuff with national identity, and identity is so closely linked with payments. The reason we're using plastic cards is they're a surrogate form of identity, and I think over time that is going to morph into something else. It may be bioidentity, it may be some device that we carry other than the plastic card, but certainly India has a lot of traction in sort of a national identity system, and that's a huge head start.
Are regulations a hindrance for the development of payment ecosystem? Say, for example, the two-step authentication process. How do you see that in India?
Yeah, look, regulations are supposed to be hindrance, okay? That's everyone's like, they're a hindrance, but they're supposed to be. You don't want payment systems evolving too quickly. You want the ideas, but you also need to control it because, look, it's money. People depend on it. And anytime you start moving money, you attract a lot of fraud, a lot of bad actors. So the regulations and the creativity go hand in hand. And you have to have both. Even though regulations can be frustrating to entrepreneurs at a time, you have to respect them.
How do you think the payment ecosystem will evolve over here in India, considering the kind of technological evolution that India is going through at this point in time?
You don't have much of a penetration of credit cards here. You have a lot of debit. You have a lot of prepaid. And I was talking to the CEO of Money on Mobile, which I thought was a very interesting company today. And there are lots of fascinating opportunities that are going to be uniquely Indian. And this is the interesting thing about payments. Payments are so interwoven into each country's culture that they evolve differently. So you can't just take what's working in Europe or what's taken over in the United States and clone it. You have to build something that's indigenous and uniquely Indian.
From unicorns, the conversation about unicorpses, so is there a correction in terms of valuations for startups?
I honestly don't pay any attention to that stuff. I really don't. The numbers that I look at are the resources that startups have. So the whole unicorn thing was something that was cloned. Aileen Lee cloned the term. I like Aileen. She was actually involved in the early part of Square, and she's wonderful. But I think labeling any company as a valuation is inappropriate. I think what you're looking for is ability of a company to get the resources it needs. And what we see as a trend in general is entrepreneurship is getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. Okay, so these days you don't have to have a server farm, you can use it in the cloud. Your development stack is getting simpler and simpler each iteration.
What does Jim McKelvey have up his sleeve as far as engaging himself with India as an entrepreneur or as an innovator or as a startup is concerned?
So I'm a partner in a couple of venture funds that are looking at making some investments in some Indian companies. I can't tell you which ones those are right now, but we are seriously considering it. I'm also the founder of a nonprofit called Launch Code, which helps get talented people jobs in programming. And you wouldn't think that's difficult, but it turns out that just because you can do the work doesn't mean you can get the job. And the United States has a big problem with this, and we're solving it there, and I'm hoping the solution will be international someday.
All right. I just want to ask, is there, the way in Indian payment ecosystem is, do you think a Square-like company can exist in India or come up in India?
I don't know what you mean by Square-like. Okay, so it will be a uniquely Indian solution. I mean, Square's in a number of countries, but in each case we have to respect the different cultures of those countries, and it's that respect for how things are different because payment is a form of communication. Payment is something that's very personal and unique to an ecosystem. So you have to respect that, and I think if it will be Square-like in some ways, I hope, but it will certainly be different.
A big voice from Silicon Valley as far as the payment landscape is concerned. But Krishna didn't just manage to snag that exclusive. He also spoke to an important player in the Indian payment landscape, Bipin Preet Singh, the CEO of MobiKwik, on how he really will tackle competition going forward, considering the wallet space is becoming very crowded. Let's listen in.
We are throwing a big challenge to the banks, I think. We have about 25 million users and we have about 50,000 merchants on the platform. So with MobiKwik app, you can today recharge your phone, you can pay bills, you can pay for Delhi Dal Board, which Mr. Kejriwal recently inaugurated. You can pay for Delhi Metro, you can pay for Indian Railways. Our goal is completely eliminate cash, and we are doing it step by step. We have done it for utility payments, we have done it for online payments, and now the big next step is offline payments, which means that wherever you go, as soon as you step out of here, your smartphone, you should be able to pay for everything.
All right. And how has business been in terms of adoption to your platform?
Business has been great, and it couldn't be better. You're from the media, so you would know. Last 1 year, there's been massive adoption of wallets in general as a category, both across the customers as well as merchants, both online and offline. As far as the market is concerned, there's still a long way to go. Remember, we're still at 200 million smartphones, out of which maybe less than half have data. So we are talking about less than 10% of India's population who have data on smartphones, out of which about 20 to 30% today use electronic payments. So we are really talking about 2 to 3% or 5% market penetration for our business.
What kind of traction you've witnessed, and what is your plan, say, over the next 12-month horizon?
So we have been growing 4 times year on year for the last 4 years. Right, and this year again we are on track to cross. So we are on track to touch $1 billion in GMV in the next 6 months or so, and we are on course to touch about 50 million users, and we are on course to have 100,000 merchants in the offline platform, and we are on course to launch new services which will be beyond payments.
How do you tackle competition? Say a Freecharge or a Paytm, they have really deep wallets. How do you compete with competitors with deep pockets, and what are your funding plans going forward?
So companies which are only focused on creating a payments business and innovating in the payments business have a far better chance of winning even with less capital. And as far as capital is concerned, we have raised a Series B round early last year, and we are on course to close another round pretty soon.
How much?
Around $40 to $50 million. And so as soon as we do that, I think the money, there is a lot of excitement in global investors, especially Asian investors, who look at India as the last frontier of growth market, where there is a lot of opportunity for growth. And therefore, we have found a lot of takers for our business.
Consider the number of launches we've seen, say, over the last year or so. So is consolidation the way forward?
I don't know. We would definitely like to acquire some companies, companies which have built specific IPs. So I think the biggest issue with respect to our kind of business model is you need a lot of scale, both on the user side and on the merchant side, in order to build a long-term sustainable business. Just solving one piece of the puzzle at one end, doesn't really help. It is not scalable. So we think that, we are open to partnering a lot of such companies, specifically technology companies based out of Bangalore, Mumbai, who look forward to work and leverage our data, our platform to do a lot of innovative things.
From 2 payment companies to an important set of earnings, where Japanese telecom and internet giant SoftBank reported third quarter numbers that missed expectations. But I think what people were keenly tracking in India is the fact that they have officially announced OYO's acquisition of Zorooms, and they've also given some color on how their other portfolio companies like Ola and Snapdeal have performed. Remember, SoftBank is one of the biggest investors in India's startup ecosystem. For more details, let's go across to Rahul Daima. Rahul, give us some details on the OYO Zorooms deal, and also how the other portfolio companies have fared for SoftBank.
Yes, the deal that has been in works for the last 2-3 months has now formally been announced by OYO's largest investor, SoftBank, in its earnings report. Surprisingly, while both companies are still mum on this deal, we are understanding from our sources that this is in fact an all-stock deal. Co-founders and investors of Zo will receive over 7% of stock in OYO rooms. We are also understanding that more than 11,000 hotel rooms that Zo operates in more than 50 cities have already been transferred to OYO, and employees of Zo have started working for OYO from the last few weeks. We are also understanding that the deal, a few formalities are really left. An official announcement will be made as early as 2 weeks by both companies. Moving on, apart from this announcement that SoftBank shared in its earnings report, OYO's growth found a special mention. They say that OYO has clocked more than 90 lakh hotel room bookings in the last quarter alone. Also, 2 other of its portfolio companies, Ola and Snapdeal have found a special mention. Ola, they say, has witnessed a 10x growth really in cab bookings the last quarter, while Snapdeal, some interesting details, their gross sales grew by 90% year on year. Diwali sales, really the big bonanza time for e-commerce companies. Snapdeal saw 3x growth there, and the fact that they have more than 2.5 lakh merchants on their website, and after the acquisition of Freecharge have 14 million registered wallet users. Surprisingly, 3 other portfolio companies of SoftBank did not find mention, Grofers, InMobi and Housing, but going by the commentaries from SoftBank, they are very bullish on their India portfolio. Coming back to the acquisition of Zoho, this really kicks the trend of a continuous consolidation in the consumer internet space, something that is likely to continue this year as well.
Thank you, Rahul Dayama, for bringing us that important report here on 18 Hours Startup Central. Moving on to the other big story that we have here. Chandra, the word coming in is that wearable tech or wearables will soon phase out the mobile phone. That's not my word, but that's the word coming in from Goki's founder and CEO, Vishal Gondal, who I caught up with here at the Nasscom India Leadership Forum 2016, and he was bullish about the adoption to wearables amidst all the cynicism as to whether consumer demand exists for wearables, be it abroad or in the Indian market. He is quite positive. In fact, he said that the company is looking to expand to China and the US markets as well. Take a look at that exclusive conversation.
Globally, wearables is one of the biggest segments. Fitbit just went IPO. At the same time, there are several companies with Apple Watch and Samsung Gear. So clearly, miniaturization of technology and Internet of Things is going to become big. So the phone is going to become smaller and smaller, and soon you will be wearing your phone on your wrist or wearing it on your glasses. In a few years' time, the mobile itself will disappear and everybody will have a wearable of some kind, whether it is for medical, whether it is for payment, whether it is for finance, whether it is for security. There are so many use cases of wearables, both in the enterprise space as well as the personal space.
The reason why I'm asking you this question is because, even in a market like US, wearables have seen a subdued demand over the past several quarters. How do you see, the Indian market shaping up in terms of consumer demand for wearables?
So, no, consumer demand is actually massive. I mean, if you look at the online trends, if you look at largely online, clearly Flipkart, Amazon, Paytm, all are our key marketplaces. The other big demand is coming from corporates. And the last and the most exciting part, which we are personally working on, is finally linking your wearable to your health and your insurance. So I think the big game changer will be when these devices can even help you right at the healthcare end, which is going to be exciting.
How does Goki differentiate itself from other players? You've got like the biggies like Apple getting into the wearable segment too, already established players like Fitbit. How does Goki differentiate itself from the other players in the market?
See, the point is all the other wearables are just focusing on data. They are telling you that you're walking X steps and you are burning this many calories. Most people already know that, and what happens is typically a person buys a wearable device and in a few weeks time they stop using it. So the usage has been a big challenge for most people. We at Goki understood that insight and actually created a service model on top of it, where this data is analyzed by real fitness coaches, yoga coaches, meditation coaches, and they advise you, tell you what to do. So instead of trying to make it a hardware-centric model, we made it a service-centric model. So we are hardware agnostic. While we give you a Goki band, you could use any band you want, because we believe eventually every phone will have the capability to track everything, whether it is your heart rate, whether it is your steps. So the wearable will become part of whatever you do. I think the question for us is how fast can we grow? So the key goal for us is how do we get to millions of users in India, and that's what we are working on. The other big plan for us is China and the US. So this year we will be seeing Goki commercially launch in America. That's been a big part of our plan. And of course China, which is going to be hopefully end of this year or next year, is where we'll be going.
Right, away from there and on to the other big story that we're talking about over here. Silicon Valley entrepreneur Marc Andreessen, who waded into the net neutrality debate today and ended up being roasted on Twitter. No, while netizens in India didn't like his criticism of the ban on free basics, what really riled them up was a tweet where he said being anti-colonialism has been economically catastrophic for India over the past decades. Now, you can imagine the kind of reactions he would have got there on Twitter for saying something like that. Now, after that Twitter storm, resigned Marc Andreessen, in fact, tweeted that he withdraws from any future discussion on Indian politics and economics, and he subsequently deleted the controversial tweets as well. That's Marc Andreessen, Silicon Valley entrepreneur and investor, wading into the net neutrality debate, being roasted on Twitter, and eventually resigning himself, and in fact getting out of it as well. And time now for number crunching with Chandra. Chandra, over to you.
Krishna, considering Maria Sharapova got so much grief for not knowing Tendulkar on Twitter, I'm not really surprised Marc Andreessen got this reaction. But moving on to number crunch, the number we are crunching for you today is $2.5 million. That's the average valuation of a startup in India according to data from Nasscom. Now remember, this might be a skewed number because you have billions of dollars going to some of the unicorns and a very small number coming to the really small startups. But I guess on an average, this is the valuation as far as Indian startups are concerned. With that, Krishna, it's over to you.
All right, Chandra, with that, we come to the end of this edition of ET Now, Startup Central, India's first and daily show on the startups and entrepreneurship. It's been a pleasure bringing this to you live from the Nasscom India Leadership Forum 2016 here in Mumbai. Time for a break here, but keep watching ET Now. Coming up next is Market Watch.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.